Well, my goodness, we filled the room and we're still filling it. Well, there's about 1,000 people, I think, in room one. And here we are, and we had it's been a very, very busy day, in a good way. And I'm just thrilled to see so many people keeping this Ash Wednesday in the beginning of these 40 days of Lent holy by your taking the time to think, to pray, and to give God time. We already gave out ashes, but just for those of you who might be wondering, did you miss them? No, because what will happen is after Mass is over, we will come in line again for ashes for anyone who missed them. You probably had a hard time finding a place to park, I would imagine. So fear not, I have to tell you that the word Lent comes from an Anglo-Saxon word meaning springtime. Although the word lente, in Latin means slowly. So when I was studying Latin in high school and we were talking about lente meaning slowly, I had the temerity to ask my Latin teacher, then why is Lent a time for fast? That was beginning of 4 years of misery after I said that. So here you are, you sinners. How wonderful. We should have, rented a stadium or something or other for everybody. They're all knowing that they're sinners. By the way, do you know how important it is to know that you're forgiven? You know how important it is to know that you're not condemned? How important it is to know that God continues to let His mercy shine upon us? That is one of the most important things we have in our Catholic faith, is the knowledge of God's mercy. The other part is that you have repeatable confession. You only get baptized once, but you can go to confession as many times as you need to. And originally it was not that way. If you look at the early history of the church, it took a while for people to prepare for baptism. And when they were baptized, the whole sense is that they would then have put on Christ, become a new creation. They had clothed themselves in glory, which is why you have the white robe and the candle. You've been enlightened by Christ and are to walk always as a child of the light. They didn't expect him to be perfect, but there were certain sins that they thought just would not be possible for them to commit. But lo and behold, they committed all the sins they could. Nothing was impossible. And what happened is the church looked at the position of the people of God fresh from baptism, but now, encased in sin. And they said, what should we do? Should we rebaptize? And they said, no, God doesn't take back what He gave. God is always faithful. You don't have to repeat baptism. So, well, the people aren't living their baptismal promises. What should we do? And they said, well, the Lord is kind and merciful, slow to anger and abiding in love and mercy. Let's throw them out of the church. And they did. And they had said, well, this isn't working because everybody's in need of apparently being thrown out. As I'll tell you what, we will just tell them they can come, they can pray, they can listen to the scriptures, they can't come to communion. And what they'll do, they'll have a period of re-preparation to be able to be acknowledged to come back and join with the community. And the people that made the decision to have them come back in wasn't the priest or bishops, it was the community would say to people, and it might have taken them like 7 years of penance to show their sincerity of heart. And then the community would say, we think Joe and Ann have really, are sincere. Let them come back to the altar with us. And the community would accept them back. Now, auricular confession, repeatable auricular confession, came about because there was nothing else open to the sinner. You had that second chance, so to speak, in which case you could be invited back. But if you continued to sin, what would they do? There was nothing there, even though you had baptism and the Eucharist. And remember, in the Eucharist we have, this is my body, this is my blood, would be shed for you and for many, so that sins may be forgiven. Do this in memory of me. And to do this in memory of me isn't just lift the chalice, it's also forgive one another. Do this in memory of me. Forgive one another. And so what happened is people realized that even though they had their best intentions, they fell short. And the scripture says the just person falls 7 times a day. So what happened is during the time in the 800s with the monasteries, and especially in Ireland, there came the practice of ordinary people, lay people who were not priests or monks or professed religious, but they admired the prayerful life and the simplicity of the life of the religious. And so they would go to the monasteries and they would sit down and share, with the brothers, with the monks, with the abbots, their failings. And what would happen is this. The people listening would read the scriptures, reminding them of God's mercy and love, and then they would encourage them. That, in time, became repeatable auricular confession. But it was a practice that was condemned by the church because it said this is too easy for people. They can just sin and then go be forgiven and sin and go be forgiven. Where's their firm purpose of amendment? And it was condemned by the Council of Toledo, I think, in the 1100s. How many people know all this already? But what happened is when the 1200s came around, by that time there was a book by Peter Lombard, and he had listed 7 sacraments. It was the first time the number 7 was given to sacraments. And in that number of 7 was repeatable auricular confession. Why am I sharing this with you? 2 reasons. One is the community of the people of God on pilgrimage to the Father, because they have the Spirit of God within them, they realize their need for mercy. And even though the church and its strictures and judgments in trying to be pure would say something like, well, you can't bless sin. It'd say, you can't bless people who are sinning. But the community and then eventually the church realized you also just can't throw them out. And so there had to be a way to live with each other. And this is part of what Lent is all about. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, and setting our sights on 40 days of this, it unites us in ways more than we ever imagined when we were first told that Lent was a time for you to make a sacrifice and give up something. So if you were an adult, you gave up alcohol or cigarettes. If you were a child, you gave up candy or hitting your brother or sister. But the reality is, with prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, it reminds us of the 3 levels on which we relate. Prayer ties us to God. Fasting ties us to our heart. To be able to give something up in itself, to be able to do without something, is a reminder to us of our humility that we do not have to have everything that we want in this life. But what we do need is a relationship with God and a relationship with our neighbor, and that's where the almsgiving comes in. The prayer unites us back to God in a right relationship. The fasting, the self-denial, teaches us to return to the purity of our heart, where the most simplest things that we need are free. And the generosity to those who are hungry and who are poor, that reminds us that we don't go through life alone. We are related to God and to neighbor, and we strive to keep our hearts focused on both, for our own salvation, but also for the building up of the community of the people of God. And that's why the greatest commandment is love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And in between love of God and love of neighbor are our hearts. And that's why a clean heart, create for me, O God. That's what Lent is about. And the word Lent, from Anglo-Saxon, meaning springtime, it's a time to grow again from death to new life. Now, I can tell you, we can sin. When Jesus on the cross said, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing, I really believe that that is a more precise statement than we ever tend to really fully think about, because there are very few people in life who are deliberately cruel. We make mistakes along the way. We do things that if we had further reflection, we would have never done once we realized what the heck happened after we did it and how much of these relationships were injured or destroyed. And so, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. And sometimes we simply just make mistakes because we haven't thought everything out. And I can tell you, you probably have heard this story. I think I tell it every Ash Wednesday of every parish I'm in. And it has to do when I was 32 years old, and I was at a parish in Catonsville. It was one of the larger parishes in the Archdiocese. And on Ash Wednesday, we went everywhere. We went to tons of people who were housebound. We went to the school, which had 3 classrooms for every grade. We had Mass in the church and in the hall, at almost every hour on the hour, it seemed. And we gave ashes in the high school. And on my way back from the high school, I was beginning to think, I should eat something. And I saw McDonald's and I went, fish sandwiches. Fish sandwiches, yeah, that's it. And I parked the car, and there was tons of cars on the parking lot, like tonight. And I got in line, and there were so many people in line that it took a while for me to get served. And when they said, what would you like? I forgot completely about fish sandwiches, and I ordered what I always order. It was, I'll have the Big Mac and large fries. And I was in a collar with my black habit on. And I'm looking for a table. There isn't any table. I guess I've eaten the car. Oh, wait, there's one. And it was right at the corner of the only door that comes into the restaurant. That is the entrance and exit. And I'm sitting there at the table in my collar, and I'm amazed at how many people are coming up to me smiling, going, hey, Father, that's a good hamburger, isn't it? And I'm going, it's the best. I love these, And it wasn't until I got back to the rectory, and they said, you get something to eat? I said, yeah, I stopped at McDonald's. You get a fish sandwich? I said, no, I got a hamburger. You got a hamburger. It's Ash Wednesday. I went, oh, no. So it caused great joy among the priest and pastor in the rectory because I had publicly sinned. And somehow I think it made everybody else feel a little bit better. So I would just say this as a final way of pulling this together. The idea of giving something up is really good with regard to our teaching ourselves that we don't have to have everything. But instead of just fasting, we're really looking for a change of heart. Create a clean heart in me, O God, and a steadfast spirit renew within me. And so Pope Francis, a man of beautiful words, he says this. He says, do you want to fast this Lent? He says, fast from hurting words and feast on kind words. Fast from sadness and feast on gratitude. Fast from anger and feast on patience. Fast from pessimism and feast on hope. Fast from worries and feast on trust in God. Fast from complaints and feast on simplicity of life. Fast from pressures and feast on prayer. Fast from bitterness and feast on joy. Fast from selfishness and feast on compassion towards others. Fast from past grudges and feast on reconciliation and forgetfulness. Fast from words and be silent so you can feast on God. Happy Lent. May it be one of the best Lents for us all.